Yeah, I mean, every once in a while when you're watching them or you're listening to a broadcast, you get the feeling that the Phillies are just in a slump or unlucky. They're just not as talented as the teams are playing. That's the bottom line. And beyond that, Mike, I think the biggest misjudgment that the whole regime has made over the last couple of years is this idea that people in the stands, people who watch the games, are so attached to the guys who won here that they just can't bear the idea of seeing them go. Nothing could be further from the truth. These people are ready to move on. And one of the worst results of that line of thinking is not even so much in the standings. It's that guys who should be remembered as heroes here are remembered for this, for the late stages of their career when they're not the same players, when they're getting booed, when they're striking out, when they're hitting 187. That's a shame. You know, maybe at some point those memories fade, but right now, you know, that impression is overpowering the memories of the good times.
Yeah, that's well said, Jay, because, as he said, people wanted us to break it down 2 years ago, and then a couple of weeks ago he said the fans don't know what they're talking about. Well, now he's basically saying, well, you guys were right. We should have broke it down 2 years ago, but now that we are, you're asking why we're not winning. I don't know that I'm hearing people ask why they're not winning. I think they're completely pointing the finger at Ruben right now, and we hear these reports about Andy McPhail, and you wonder, are those true? And if they are, would that kind of signify to you, Jay, that the end could be coming for Ruben?
Well, first of all, I've asked enough people about this who should know, and none of them talk me away from it, to think that this is real. You know, you haven't seen a single denial. You saw no comment. Talk to people who know Andy, have known him for a long time. Talk to people with the Phillies. Talk to people inside the hierarchy of Major League Baseball. Nobody is talking me off this idea that Andy McPhail is in line to wind up here. And I mean, you can speculate all you want about what that means for Ruben, but you know, a friend of Pat Gillick told me a long time ago, Pat doesn't like firing people. And, you know, Pat was the guy who anointed Ruben, right? And that puts him in a really awkward position here. Ideally, it probably would be best for somebody with a fresh set of eyes to evaluate the whole organization, the front office, the manager, the coaching staff, the players, the farm system, the whole deal, top to bottom, and make those decisions. I mean, we're just trying to connect dots right now to say that's what would result if this were to happen. But I think it's reasonable to connect those dots.
Jayson Starks with us, ESPN.com senior baseball writer. Now, the Andy McPhail rumors, good, bad, we don't know how real, but a lot of people have kind of speculated in the industry that Sandberg a little overmatched here. And you said Pat Gillick doesn't like to fire someone, but McPhail would be in a weird situation too. They were together in Chicago, and Sandberg gets elected to the Hall of Fame. Is that something he's going to want to come in and do if he's going to be the guy that gets brought in here?
Well, I mean, that's a really hard question to answer, but I really don't get this sense that Ryne Sandberg's getting fired during the season. Let me ask you this. What would be the point?
Right. No, absolutely.
You know, I mean,
not now, obviously.
Spur this team into finishing 50 games under 500 instead of 60, right? There's not a lot of reason to do that. I mean, especially if you're going to make a change in the team president's office and ask that person to evaluate everything. So I just don't think that Ryne Sandberg's in immediate danger. I think long-term everybody's in danger.
Jay, obviously, we got a lot of things to get into. Cole Hamels scratched tonight. They're saying minor. Omont is up. Is this a bad thing for Hamels' value? I mean, is this a bad timing for them, or do they really believe this is minor and they're just being taking very precautionary measures here?
I mean, Mike, I have to admit, I wasn't there this week. I was in Bristol, Connecticut, and I haven't had anybody diagnose Cole's injury for me. I only know what they've said and what they've read. Talked to other teams about it. If this is just a missed start, he comes back, he doesn't miss a beat, then it's nothing. It's a blip on the radar. If it winds up being 3 weeks, then he needs a rehab start. Then he doesn't get back out in the mound until July 18th. Then it has an impact. Then you have a little wait and see going on. So I think until we know exactly what this injury is and how long he's going to be out, it's hard to make that call. But I did do a big piece on the July trade market that is on our site now, posted yesterday. And, I mean, just talking to other clubs, there's as much interest in Cole Hamels as there's ever been. He's the number one attraction on this market, and he has been. And I quoted an executive of one team saying that, if anything, his market value is higher now than it was in spring training. So Ruben rolled the dice. He didn't trade him this winter. He didn't trade him this spring. He held on to him until July for just this moment in time. And now he's waiting around for somebody to get desperate. And they would have to be incredibly motivated to pay the price he's asking, because still hearing a lot of the same stuff I've heard from other teams for a long time now, that Ruben just gets dug in on certain players, certain types of deals, doesn't want to budge, isn't that flexible on the money. And until there's some indication that he's more flexible on all of that, I think it's going to be really hard to deal with this guy, whether he's healthy or not.
You know, I know we talked about Oman, who's going to pitch for him, and, he's not pitching bad as a starter. I think his story's pretty crazy. He gets knocked off the 40-man, no takers. He goes across the street and pitches the same day and says, look, I'd like to be a starter. I guess the fact that he's a starter is giving him one more opportunity, or is this just a spot start and a spot start only for him? Or can he impress enough to say, you know what, maybe we can salvage him as a starter?
Well, I mean, the fact that he's up at all tells you that there's an incredible opportunity for anybody. Okay. This is a guy who throws 96 miles an hour. So, and they got him back in a fairly significant trade for which they've been widely panned, correct? So, don't you think that if he were to pitch well, that he would get an opportunity to do it again? They would love to have this trade work out, believe me. I don't know what to make of him. He still has a great arm. He still throws hard. And he still goes through these stretches where he walks the ballpark. Last 5 starts in AAA, 26 innings, 25 walks, 26 strikeouts. And so, if he walks 6 in 6 innings, 5 in 7 innings, whatever works out, that's going to be trouble. I've talked to scouts who have seen him good. I think he might have found something and turned the corner. Talked to scouts who've seen the nightmares where he had a game where he walked 8, another game where he walked 6. Last time out he walked 5. When you see him on those nights, you just shake your head. So it'd be really fascinating to see him in this role. We've seen him in a lot of roles, but never starting a game.
Not been very good in the roles he's been in the majors. Hopefully this works out for him. And as you said, the Phillies hope that they can salvage something from that 2009 Lee deal. Jayson Stark's with us here, driven by Team Nissan, the spot where the checkered flag drops. Don't forget, Jayson Stark will be signing books tomorrow at Barnes & Noble in Marlton, New Jersey from 2 to 4 with Ray Didger. I'll actually be in Marlton, New Jersey, Jay, tomorrow. Maybe I'll stop by and see you. I got a wedding.
Hey, that'd be awesome, man. Why don't you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, you know that Ray and I are chatty, right? That's our favorite thing about these signings is we people come in and we wind up talking to them, about some of them, for a long time if they're if we're not too busy scribbling our names, and it's fun. That's my favorite thing about all the signings is talking to people, hearing their stories, listening to them vent about the Phillies. All good.
2 to 4 tomorrow, Barnes & Noble, Marlton. So make a appointment to be there. And a lot of people made an appointment last night to see Aaron Nola. He pitched and, he won the game and obviously pitched okay. Nothing special. It wasn't like, wow, this is get him up now. But any rumblings from Nola from the last time we've talked and now that he's been at AAA, do you anticipate something happening sooner than later?
I don't think anything's going to happen soon. He struck out 5 of the first 11 he faced last night. He just does what he does. He repeats his delivery. He puts the ball wherever he wants. He throws strikes at every level. Did it in college, did it in AA, did it last night in AAA. He's going to do this. I had a scout who saw him in AA maybe 2 weeks ago, called me and said, he's the man. I mean, he is the real deal. And I think we should not expect him to come up up whenever he comes up and duplicate Cole Hamels' career. He's not quite that. But this guy he knows what he is. He knows how he's going to get you out, and he's just continued to do this everywhere he's ever been. And there's no reason to think he's not going to be, maybe a number 2, maybe a really consistent, dependable number 3 who, has an ERA in the low 3s and throws a ton of strikes. And at some point, after Cole Hamels gets traded, after Aaron Harang gets traded, when they're looking around saying, who the heck is going to pitch, they'll decide that is the time to give some of these younger pitchers that they value so much an opportunity. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think a lot of Phillies fans are waiting for that because it's tough seeing Jerome Williams and Sean O'Sullivan and Kevin Correa 3 out of the 5 days get turns in the rotation, Jay, and obviously.
And how about this weekend where the Cardinals come to town? The Cardinals, right? And 2 days in a row, 2 of the 3 days in the series, they face pitchers making their first career start, right?
Yeah, well, and, that's one of the things that frustrates you a lot around baseball. You see a lot of young pitchers. I think the game is changing where young pitchers are getting these opportunities and they're getting their chances to go up there and throw. And sometimes they're ready and sometimes they're not. And who knows whether that's the right or wrong way to do it. But the Phillies seem to think that pitching the Williams and Correas of the world is a better way to go.
Well, one thing I've noticed about every game I've ever attended, somebody always pitches it. and I mean, really, these guys are filling space in this rotation until the next generation gets here. And I don't think the shelf life on any of them is particularly long. But as I mentioned, somewhere along the line here, somebody has to pitch every night.
Well, and that any indication, I know Williams is not going to start, and somebody's got to pitch his next spot in the rotation. Billingsley on assignment, probably not ready. Does anybody know who's going to fill that spot?
Yeah, they just announced that it's going to be Adam Morgan. Okay. And that'll be interesting, too, because once upon a time he was a great-looking prospect with a great arm. Then he hurt his shoulder and really has not been the same, hasn't thrown well. So, I mean, this will be an opportunity to see how far he has come back, and they need somebody to come back.
Well, Jay, I know you've been around the game for a long time, and the Phillies bullpen blunder the other day, I can't remember seeing something in a game like that where it looks bad. I mean, obviously, there's other ways you can go about it. I mean, you call time, you tell the pitcher to tell the second baseman to tell the center fielder. I mean, there's other ways. Just the symbolism of waving the white towel and just the mess, and then McClure and Chase Utley's giving him the business. You got Frank Gore throwing 50 pitches out there. By the way, better than almost anybody else who threw. But just kind of give your thoughts on that whole situation and how it kind of symbolizes what has happened to this team.
You're trying to get me in trouble. Sometimes stuff just happens, but it sure happens to them a lot. Like nobody knew that the phone was off the hook. They didn't. I'm pretty sure they didn't intend for the phone to be off the hook. I heard Jeff Francoeur's joke about Jonathan Papelbon taking it off the hook. I'm pretty sure this just happened, but it led to a situation where Jeff Francoeur went out there, and he's a good soldier, and he's a fun guy, and he was throwing 87, 89 miles an hour when he first got started, and it seemed like this was a good idea. Next thing you know, he's throwing 48 pitches, and they couldn't get him out of there, couldn't get anybody warmed up. I mean, almost had to bring in Ken Giles to relieve a position player. That would have been good, right? And you had the scene on the mound with Chase Utley, obviously defending Jeff Francoeur and taking it out on Bob McClure. And this would make twice in a week we've had a little incident on the mound and off the mound involving the pitching coach and a member of his team. And I don't know exactly what to make of it. There are two different incidents, but we saw a lot of this last year, too, where players just openly disrespected members of the coaching staff. It's not a good thing. I don't know exactly what it says, but if this is a sign that is happening again, that's a bad sign.
Yeah, and obviously it doesn't look good. It's 19-3, and I know the team goes 0-8 on the trip. It hasn't happened since 1883. They were shut out for 24 straight innings at one point. The history of futility of this season is continuing for this ball club.
Right, and tonight they have a chance to break a record. And do you know what that record is? The record is most consecutive games with no starting pitcher earning a win.
Wow.
And if they get through tonight, first of all, it would complete 4 consecutive weeks of that. Second, it would be the 24th game in a row. Yesterday, even though they won that game, they tied the franchise record. The franchise record is 23 in a row, and it was set by a team that had a good excuse for having no starting pitcher win a game, because nobody won a game. They had the longest losing streak in modern history. That 61 Phillies lost 23 games in a row, and now this team just tied that team. You never want to be in the same sentence as that team and its losing streak. Look, not all of this is the starting pitcher's fault. It's hard to win a game when your team never scores a run, which happens a lot. But it's just an amazing development. It's one after another after another. I'm somebody who chronicles historical things, right? Good and bad. And I always tell people all the time, if you're gonna watch a bad team, you should watch a historically bad team, because it keeps producing incredible notes like this that just boggle the mind.
Well, it seems that every Friday when we talk, we have a different historical fact of futility for this team. They just keep on coming. It's unbelievable. It's been a sad season. You know, the fact of the matter is this team by July 31st is probably, how many guys, Jay, do you think will be gone?
Well, I think they have 7 players that they would really like to move. Okay, Hamels and Harang out of the rotation. I think they both get traded. Jonathan Papelbon in the bullpen. I think there's a reasonable chance he gets traded. Ben Revere, they're working hard to get him traded. Beyond that, Howard, Utley, Ruiz. I would bet none of them get traded, but it's possible.
All right, let's look at some of the things on the national stage here. Hackgate. Has this thing not gotten enough attention? Too much attention? Where do you stand on St. Louis breaking into Houston's computer here?
Has it not gotten enough attention? Like we interrupt this program type material on CNN.
Well, it wasn't quite. It wasn't quite the Deflategate. It wasn't quite the Deflategate, but in the baseball
world, we're
not
there yet. But at the end of this trail, this could be way worse than Deflategate. Somebody told me the other day, an attorney I talked to, that by the time we wind up with indictments potentially, people heading for jail potentially, this would make Tom Brady's thing look like a leaf in a windstorm. And that's just because this is bigger than a baseball story. When the FBI gets involved, then we're no longer talking about a couple of innocent, fun-loving employees just trying to make life entertaining for themselves and miserable for the general manager of the Astros, who's a former employee of the Cardinals. When the FBI is involved, this can spill over into cybercrime, hacking, corporate espionage, issues that are about to become possibly the biggest worldwide story of our time.
Wow. And
that's why it's such a big thing. I'm curious about it on a baseball level, really curious about who did it, how far up the chain it went, what information they gleaned, how they used it. Obviously, everybody's curious about that. But if people go to jail for some sort of cybercrime within the sport, that's unprecedented and frightening, to be honest with you.
Pretty crazy stuff, no doubt, especially because it's coming from the Cardinals, a Model S franchise, going after the Astros, who were very not so good over the last 5-6 years or so. And that's what I think is so bizarre in the whole situation, that the Cardinals are looking at the Astros.
Well, there's a reason for it, but I would say that the number one prevailing reaction of people I've talked to in baseball about this is shock that it's the Cardinals. Shock. Yeah. If you know of Bill DeWitt, their owner and his reputation, you just would never look at that guy and say, well, he's engineering some sort of corporate espionage scheme. John Mozeliak is a button-down, conservative, bow-tie-wearing guy. This wouldn't seem to be his thing as much as he and the Cardinals love information. It's just shock about who it is. I mean, the reason that they would be doing this to the Astros is that the general manager of the Astros, Jeff Lunau, once was a very high-ranking official for the Cardinals, was a divisive figure, and some of the people who were on the wrong side of the divide weren't big fans, obviously. And this, the New York Times suggested that this was done to embarrass him, in that it might have had a revenge or vengeful type motive. And that doesn't justify it. If anything, the fact that it got personal, that could wind up making the penalties even more severe.
Couple more real quick, Jay. What do you think of the Sandoval on Instagram in the middle of the game?
You got to be kidding. I know this is the age we live in, and I plead guilty. If you said to me, have you ever gone out to dinner with your wife, with your friends, and suddenly checked your phone because you wanted to check Twitter or Facebook or whatever? I have done that. I am guilty. But this can't happen. I was in the studio last night with Eric Wedge. You just can't believe how outraged as a former manager he was. You have a responsibility as a player, certainly as a high-profile, high-paid player like Pablo, to understand the importance of your job. And the fact that that a guy who, by the way, had a chance to hit in the inning would go up to the clubhouse, didn't use the restroom down by the dugout, went up to the clubhouse and checked his phone and checked Instagram and liked photos of pretty women in the middle of a game, in the middle of an inning, is just unbelievable. It's embarrassing, but it just kind of reflects the disarray the Red Sox are in.
And the world that we live in today as well, somewhat disarray, this is, hey, let me go check my phone in the middle of the Major League Baseball game. You're right. I couldn't believe this story, and you're right. It sets a really bad precedent. There are some people that think that some of these guys should be able to interact live during games and stuff the way, to be able to talk and ask questions if you're not playing. But I agree with you. I can't subscribe to seeing guys doing that in the middle of a game.
If there is a rule against this, and probably the most egregious violation was Ozzie Guillen back when he was still managing, getting thrown out of a game and going up to the clubhouse and tweeting stuff about the umpires. You think that's worse? I'm going to say baseball probably thinks that's worse.
All right, All-Star Game voting, 7 Royals.
8 Royals. 8
Royals now, and I know a lot of people over the years, we've tinkered with the All-Star Game voting. Are we going to see more changes?
However it turns out this year, they're going to allow that team to take the field. But there's going to be reaction next year. I'm soliciting ideas. If you got any, let me know. The one I've thrown out there is if the starter elected by the fans doesn't finish in the top 3 of the player voting, then the fans' choice gets overridden and the player choice starts. You like that one?
Not bad. Off the top of my head, that one there said, all right, I'll like that. If the players deem that the fans' choice is not credible enough, then they can overrule.
Look, you got to do something to make sure that a guy who is the worst player at his position doesn't start the game, and that could potentially happen at second base. Omar Infante, wonderful guy and all that. Sam Mellinger, who's one of the columnists in Kansas City, wrote the other day that Royals fans wouldn't even elect him to start at second base for the Royals.
For the people out there who aren't sure what happened or how this happened, this is just the fans of Kansas City going out in droves and just stuffing ballots here, basically?
I think that's safe to say.
Mm-hmm.
There's been an incredible campaign. If a Royal gets a hit, right, if Salvador Perez gets a hit, the first thing that flashes on the screen when you're watching him taking off his batting gloves at first base is vote for Sal, vote Royals. And
wow.
They've done an incredible job of energizing their fan base and getting out the vote. But I think if you added all the votes and divided it by the population in their market, it's mathematically impossible to get this many votes.
All right, Jay. Well,
here's the good side, Mike. This will be the greatest bench in the history of sports if this happens.
For more, see Jay tomorrow with Ray Didinger at Barnes & Noble in Marlton, 2 to 4. The Stark Truth. Get the book and check it out. Have him put his name right on that book for you and meet them tomorrow, 2 to 4 in Marlton, Barnes & Noble. The Stark Report here, driven by Team Nissan, the spot where the checkered flag drops. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, Jay.
Thanks, buddy. Have a great weekend yourself.